Hey everyone, this is Dean for Paranormal Pickers. Just getting ready for our next Paranormal Picker adventure. Come on, join me.
Hello, everybody. This is the Paranormal Pickers here, and we've got a special edition here for our season 2. Right now, you got myself, Nick, and I'm joined by the illustrious Jeff Mudgett. Thank you for joining us, Jeff. And for those that don't know, maybe give us a little bit of background about yourself, what you do, where you come from, and folks will be excited as we move along here.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me on the show. I'm doing a lot of podcasts now, and I'm always excited to go on and answer some great questions from your listeners. And I'm quite often now getting questions that I haven't been asked before, but that bring up angles that I get off the shows, and then I go work on how they work out and how I'm telling the story. I was a 40-some-year-old California trial lawyer,
Okay.
who, when my grandfather passed away, he left some material behind that let me know all of a sudden, out of the cold, out of the blue, that I was the direct descendant, the great-great-grandson of H.H. Holmes, the devil in the White City, as Mr. Larson titled him. And as you can imagine, that was quite a shock. And while the rest of the family went under the covers over it, I decided I was going to look into it. I was going to research the story itself and see if I could come up with some facts, with the truth, and also maybe tell everybody out there a story about not only Holmes and the criminal that he was, but also how that sudden awakening I had discovering that terrible truth changed my life.
Sure.
And that's what I tried writing Bloodstains about my book, which I'm going to be revising here. It's going to be out in a couple of weeks.
Excellent.
Which is incorporating almost 12 more years, Nick, now of television shows, of archaeology, of anthropology, of forensic science, using some of the greatest facilities and groups that the FBI, the Scotland Yard used, trying to come up with some identities that most of American history had pretty much just assumed and left behind instead of working on the facts themselves. And as you mentioned earlier, you watched American Ripper. The guys at History and McGilla Productions did a lot of work with me on, instead of just relying on newspaper articles from the 1890s. Heck, we actually exhumed a grave. We actually went to London and checked with scientists, experts over there about handwriting comparisons, things like that. And you know what? It's been dominating my life for the last 10, 12 years. And I decided to revise my book and get all that in. So like I said, in the next couple of weeks on a new website, which I'll send you the link to on my Bloodstains Facebook page.
Fantastic.
Yeah, all your listeners will have a chance to pick it up on ebook if they'd like to take a look.
That's fantastic. Now I want to elaborate on some of the points that you touched on, just to make sure that I'm picking up the proper story here. Now, you said you were in your 40s when you found out this news, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and from a mental state, I can imagine the impact it has on the entire family, but you said you kind of switched it around and utilized it as more of a catalyst to do what you've done so far. But how did that hit you? How long did that take for you to absorb everything,
Not well. I mean, we're talking about a man that, certain authors are describing as the devil, the manager of the murder castle, the one responsible for missing, the missing people during the World's Fair that the Chicago police have never uncovered. A man who, when you research, obviously, Nick, I never believed he killed 200 people, all those legends and lores that came up about him. But the murders that he did commit were some of the worst I'd ever heard about, young children, things like that, entire families in order to defraud life insurance companies of $10,000 in a policy. He was an evil soul. And it wasn't, I could instantly see he wasn't some pathological killer like a Bundy or a Gacy. This was a man who was born different. Mm-hmm. He was brilliant. He was a very intelligent fella. I mean, he graduated from the University of Michigan Medical School with his degree. He could have been almost anything he wanted to be in the 1890s, and he took off after this thing, which, I don't know if anyone, there's been a lot of books written about him, Nick, but I don't know if anyone's ever uncovered why a man with his talent, his intellect would have gone that way. And I thought maybe, Nick, if I tried to do it the right way, that maybe it would allow us as a society to see when that was coming out again and maybe prevent it. Yeah. So you mentioned a good point there. I mean, nobody's ever really found the true motive behind it. He's a genius, yet a madman at the same time. And, he commits all these things. Now, do you have any reason to believe as to why then, we know him by two different names. We've got the H.H. Holmes, and then we've got the Herman Webster Mudgett, right? I mean, what's the reasoning behind that in any of the research that you've done? Well, Nick, he had over 40 different aliases.
Okay.
This was a very complex-minded criminal who, when you break down the individual criminals that he committed, they were a long time planned out, very complex things, which having worked, I wasn't a criminal trial lawyer, but having worked trial law in California, I could see this was a very unique soul. And I think that quote that I use on the cover of my book that Holmes made in his memoir about how he had been born with the devil in him. I think it came very close to actuality. Not that I ever believed in a devil, but that there are certain men that were capable of every wickedness, in our history, and I think this was definitely one of them.
Yeah, there may not be a per se devil, as you put it, but there's certainly evil beings and evil energy that comes out there. And if anybody personifies that, that would be, Holmes himself.
I agree. I think you put it well.
Yeah. And to that point, I mean, I often wonder, this is just a personal question before we dive too far in, you go under the name Mudgett, right? So is that to lead me to believe that everybody that knows him as H.H. Holmes, his true identity, was his last name Mudgett or was his last name Holmes?
I'll tell you an interesting story, which your listeners can jump in and help us with if they want. But when we exhumed the grave, all right, actually the two graves, and in my revision, I'm going to explain to the world why there was two graves, why there was an empty coffin in the one, why it had a mold material in it that was shaped to look like a body when it was buried first. Right. And then it's pretty obvious to me, but I get a lot of people that want to argue the fact. And then a second grave deeper with a body entombed in concrete. When the team, and we had a great team of archaeologists and anthropologists from the University of Pennsylvania.
Excellent.
Who agreed to help us. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the judge allowed us to exhume the grave. My entire family okayed it. I had to get the signature of every one of them before the judge would allow the exhumation, which wasn't an easy feat, trust me.
I can imagine.
I had some that were fine, and then finally I had one great uncle who stepped in and said, no, let's do this. You know, Jeff's been working hard on this. Let's do this. And then the family agreed. We dug down to that concrete, which the newspaper articles had all talked about to a certain degree, how he had been buried in concrete. Mm-hmm. They didn't get it right how it was situated in the graves, but there was a concrete block down there encircled in these lumber, which would it would have made it almost impossible back then to have exhumed that body, at least at dark in the night, by criminals there seeking to use the body for some type of capital gain.
So your standard grave robber wasn't getting in there.
No, it wasn't a grave robber thing. And what a number of the authors went to were these comments that Holmes was making before the execution about, here's this evil man, here's this man that no matter how many people you want to agree to he killed, which I doubt we'll ever know, here's this foul thing that that all of a sudden is afraid of the dark. Yeah. And he wanted that body encased in concrete so that no one would touch his flesh after his execution. Well, I never bought that stuff. There was something complex going on, something bizarre, something with a purpose. Mm-hmm. And the one I don't know if you've read Bloodstains before my book, but you'll realize I immediately went to the fact that he didn't want anybody knowing who was really in that grave. Okay. But back to your question about Holmes and Mudgett. As we're getting down to the block of concrete, the archaeologist jumps up out of the grave with this thing in her hand that she'd actually damaged with the sledges going down into the concrete, but it was a pewter cross. All right. Okay. And it was engraved with H.H. Holmes, not Herman Webster Mudgett, his legal name. This was a man who was talking about having been baptized before the execution, converted to Catholicism, had confessed all his sins, but he was going to go see God with this pewter cross with the H.H. Holmes, the name he'd used to commit all his crimes and murders. It was just another one of those strange coincidences, whatever you want to say it is. But it was obviously he was still playing games even when the burial was going on. So as far as what name he wanted to be known as, I think it was H.H. Holmes.
Well, and it's no hard stretch to think that somebody with a history of defrauding everybody would continue to try to do so posthumously, or even up until the point of execution. So it's no stretch in my mind to see these things come together.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I'm uncovering in the revision to Bloodstains is about what, and I'll tell you how television worked, Nix, and you probably already know this, but when you go, that don't, when you agree to co-host a show like American Ripper, you've signed your life away with contracts, all right, and it's it's the television shows have to protect their interests. They have to protect all the money they're spending. History was just madder than hell about how much money this exhumation was costing. We at first we thought it was going to cost about $100,000. It ended up being over $1 million. The grave actually started caving in on the sides to where there were other bodies on each side. Hi, Dean.
Wow.
Hey, Jeff.
There were bodies on each side, and the cemetery was worried that we were going to let these collapse in on our work.
Sure.
So we had to hire this very complex, intensive engineering group to shore
everything up. Yeah.
So, and then everything had to stop. They had to do this. All the people there, And so history was piling out the money, and they were getting upset about it. So, but we did, and we made sure we protected the bodies on each side. And when the contracts that I signed were that, I was co-host of a show, and what they came up with, I wasn't going to reveal to the world the arguments we'd had about what I believed really was. But I never signed anything saying I wasn't going to tell the world what I saw in that grave, that we exhumed. I was there because the judge had ordered me to exhume the grave and identify the body. All right. Yeah. Not to make history's ratings better. And that's what I'm putting in the revision to my book. I'm going to let everybody know what I saw in that grave and what the team found, that my experience at law and using evidence, what I think really was there. And it's quite an interesting story. It's different than what came out of that final episode. Right. And my opinion is different. And I'm going to let the world know what my opinion is and why I think that is why. And it's going to cause a lot of troubles. It's going to make history very mad at me. But it's something I've been struggling with now for a few years, 5 years now since that show ended. And my family signed the agreements to exhume. The judge ordered me to identify. I think I've got to do the right thing. And I'm going to let everyone know why I think it wasn't him in that grave, that this was perhaps the most complex fraud ever committed on the American criminal justice system in American history. And I'm gonna let the world decide, and then we'll see what happens. But I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have a lot of very influential people very mad at me, very mad.
Well, with that said, too, I mean, look, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, obviously, but you said it. You don't have any NDAs. I don't feel as if, based on what you're telling me, you have any obligation to history or anything that is going to continue on. So. What you are prepared to say is potentially groundbreaking in and of itself on the entire Holmes or Mudgett.
And I don't want to put it out there that history they were these foul people. They were great to work with. All right.
Right.
I think the first 7 episodes of American Ripper were a great television show. I loved working with Amaryllis, my co-host, the CIA gal. I think we were as close to, I wasn't, but she was as close to Scully on X-Files as you're ever going to get. I'll tell you guys an interesting story. We're there exhuming, and you can't, guys, maybe you can. I can't. I couldn't. But you can't imagine the foul smell that came up out of that grave. There were people ill around the grave, and these were archaeologists. The director says, Jeff, we need you to jump down and do some digging. I said, no way, I'm not going. I'm not going. Amaryllis says, I'll go. And she jumps down and she's digging away with the 2 anthropologists. I'll never forget that. She was
jumps
awesome
right in like it's her job. I love it.
Oh, she was awesome. And the people at history were, and when they came out with that conclusion at the end of the show, it wasn't like they were being evil or lying to America. They weren't prepared for what I was trying to show and what I'm going to show, that we were dealing with a con man of incredible talent. We were dealing with a man who falsified dental records to substitute cadavers to falsify life insurance policies. He was the master at it. Any book you go through, any book, any documentary about Holmes will admit that's what he did for a living. And how they identified that body. The body was too short, okay? The scientists admitted that to me, 6 inches too short. The physique was totally off. they called it short and stout. The lawyer in front of the jury at the trial, he's pointing at Holmes, describing this tall, thin man with skinny bones. He's describing him that way. The Boston police described Holmes that way. All right. The prison's physicians, after the hanging, when the body, no one could even, the appearance had changed so much with the hanging. The rope was embedded into the neck. The face was about to explode. They determined that two of the vertebrae in the neck had separated, broken. The two anthropologists admitted to me when the skeleton was there at the UPenn, there was no cause of death trauma to this neck.
Wow.
And then when we tested the DNA, all right, my father and I gave samples which matched perfectly. My father's and mine were perfect, as they should be, right?
Mm-hmm.
The scientists there, we had the King's College in London. They were the pros. History told me about testing DNA and comparing results like that. So they're on the phone. We've got the skull there. I even held it in my hand at one point, and then got yelled all about because I might have contaminated the DNA. But anyway. But I was doing that Hamlet talking to how could you have done this to me, man? How could you have been so evil? It was kind of fascinating. I always wanted to do it, but I was there with King's College has got the scientists on the speaker phones, and the scientists are there, and they're asking them, "Do you want teeth?" I mean, we had intact teeth, we had hair, we had mustache hair still, we had a lot of stuff. I mean, we still had him in his clothes, his boots, and they said, no, roll the skull over, get your diamond drill bit out that they knew these scientists had there at the medical laboratory, and they went into a pocket at the back of the skull, where evidently we all have like this. There's like an area there that's just soft, porous, powdery bone in the back of our skull, and that's what King's College wanted. And so I was there. They drilled in, got the powder, and they had them bag it up properly, and they mailed it off. And King's College said, "I'll have the results back in 3 days." All right. Well, 4 months later, we didn't have any results.
What gives?
Okay. I'm dealing with these scientists saying, "Hey, listen, I got a judge on my ass telling me he wants to know the identity of that body. I got my whole family here after me. They're all believing your DNA, the DNA is going to tell us, because, the skeleton's not right. Mm-hmm. The physique's off. There's no cause of death trauma." And I'd warned them all about dental records and this man falsifying dental records. This was the master of all time doing that for criminal reasons. And they said, no, DNA. Well, the scientists told me we gave up on DNA. I said, "What do you mean gave up?" They said, "We think it degraded. We just set it aside. We're going to go with the dental records." Yeah. And they told Rolling Stone magazine that too. It's published, that article. It's on record.
Wow.
And then the final episode of American Ripper came out. Well, I still don't know where that conclusion came from.
Right.
And that's what I'm intending to revise my book about, so that the world can see what I think was down in that grave. And I think the man wasn't executed. He substituted another body. That false coffin we found in the grave next to it, he bought 2 of them while he was there in prison. And all the artist depictions from the newspaper articles where you see that plywood box going down in that grave with the hump in it. You know what we found, Dean, in that plywood box? The coffin they use for prisoners when they execute them, the cheap one.
Sure.
It was full of clay. It was full of this clay material to mold shapes.
So they molded a body of him.
I still think it's the most incredible story to accurately tell in the history of American criminal justice, and I'm gonna try. We'll see what happens.
To your point, do you have any line yet still available for any of the DNA in any of this? Like, or did they've tabled it? That's not a possibility at all to drum up from what they found.
I have the results. They sent me results, which I question, because I have those two scientists being interviewed by Rolling Stone magazine, telling Rolling Stone, and this is a quote, we gave up on DNA. It had degraded. We relied on dental records to identify the body. And that's what I'm going to put out in the revision, and we'll see what happens.
Searching for the truth.
Yeah, so what Dean is referring to here, Jeff, each of our episodes this season that we've been going off of is based off of tarot cards, right? And what do they call it? The Arcane deck?
Major Arcana.
Major Arcana. Thank you for keeping me honest there. And so we've made this episode about the Hermit, and to Dean's point, the Hermit is always searching for the truth, and that's why we wanted to bring you in. It's supposed to be in Hermin. Mm-hmm. So we want to bring you on as your search for the truth continues. Carry on.
And you guys are this is the farthest I've gone out on that subject on any podcast yet, because I've decided I'm going to put it out there. And if I get sued over this, I'm going to get sued over it. I'll get up on a witness stand and swear to tell the truth, and I'll tell the world what I saw. All right. And then if that's a lawsuit, that's a lawsuit. But
how is it your lawsuit? It's your family. You're digging up your family's research.
Right. Yeah. It's also my soul. All right.
Yeah.
It's my soul. And there were innocent people involved. I know one innocent person involved, the guy down in that grave.
Yeah.
And but it's always amazing when people realize the man that we were dealing with here. We had a man who, before his execution, all of a sudden a dentist from Chicago shows up to give him a physical examination from Chicago. All right. That evidently Holmes was, he had known the man in Chicago. Remember, Holmes is the guy that the Chicago chief of police that inspected the murder castle in the basement after they determined what was going on there. This was the chief of police. These kind of things crack me up, because every time I go on one of the shows and one of the naysayers comes on and wants to debate it with me, they'll just say, "Oh, this is just a coincidence." And Holmes is coincidence after coincidence. This chief of police had been Holmes's private lawyer for 12 cases. And that's not me. That's Eric Larson in Devil in the White City.
Right.
All right. And this is the chief of police. Oh, we didn't find anything down there. Yeah. Okay.
Talk about conspiratorial.
Just another Holmes coincidence, right? I don't buy stuff like that. I was involved in too many actions in California where those are the kind of things that you win cases with.
So are they trying to withhold?
Do a little more digging. So anyway, this physical examination before the execution was done by a Chicago dentist that shows up to physically examine Holmes, and Holmes agrees to let him do it. All right. And in this physical examination report, there's a photograph of two dental casts, top and bottom, separate, which the dental technicians in the world have now told me they're from a cadaver. They're not from a living man. You can't get those casts from a living man with separated casts. There's the tongue wasn't on the photograph or anything. So here's these dental casts on a physical examination. And that's what was used to identify the body in the grave. And the scientists thought it was just remarkable that it was exactly the same. And I kept trying to tell him, wait, that's what he did for a living. He actually used photographs of dental casts on substituted corpses. Wait, don't do it like that. And they just, that's that.
Wow.
After the show was over, and after I was getting beat up a lot by some of the guys writing different stories now about the Holmes legend and lore, which I'll admit there's some exaggerations to the story left and right. He didn't kill 200 people. He didn't, all that stuff.
It started at the time of the court. I mean, the newspaper was filled with all that. Hey, this is what was going on there. I mean, yeah, like
the man got paid $7,500 by Hearst to give his memoirs to them on first page news, and so it was a big story. It was the O.J. Simpson story of the time, and the trial was covered by every major
highly publicized. Yeah,
right or wrong.
I still think Hulu should make an episode out of the trial. I think it would be an incredible episode for them, but he fires his lawyer and conducts his own defense
and hires him back.
He hires him back. He's arguing with the district attorney. Him and the judge are going at it. He's cross-examining one of his ex-wives. I mean, that's a show. God. And
his daughter, wasn't his daughter? No, his ex-wife, because
I don't think the daughter was there.
The daughter sent a letter to him or something like that, I want to say.
Yeah. So that there's this. That's one thing about the story. I just I'm gonna put it out there. I think I'm excited that Hulu is involved. I'm excited that the two biggest giants in Hollywood are involved. Scorsese and DiCaprio, and now Keanu Reeves.
Excellent.
I just think it's going to be an incredible show. I can't wait to see what they come out with. I am hoping, guys, with shows like yours, I am hoping Hulu scratches their head and says, wait a minute. If this wasn't him in that grave, we got 4 more episodes here. I'm hoping something like that comes out, but we'll see.
Now, I can imagine, can you hear me? I know I froze. Okay, my computer froze up my screen, which at least I got a good picture of me. But at any rate, you're mentioning you're mentioning the long history and the lore behind Holmes in the United States. And you told me at the beginning you catch a lot of grief already from people around here. I can only imagine what you catch from people across seas when you take upon the angle of what you were talking about previously. And we haven't even touched about him potentially being, the Ripper. Actually,
my biggest fan club is London. They love my book, and they can't wait for me to come over. And I'm preparing a presentation right now from a group called Gold Entertainment, who they cold called me. They'd watched my TED Talk. It's TEDx Talk in Vancouver. It was an amazing event to be a part of. I'll never forget it. And they want me to make that presentation, stretch it out and make that presentation again, because they believe it. And they say once we get that presentation made and show it in Chicago and Philadelphia and New York City, they said they're pretty convinced that the people in London will fly us over and have me put it on over there. And after the show was over, I don't know how much you guys are familiar with how I put the story together about him being the author of the Dear Boss letter and the murder of Catherine Eddowes, number 4 of the 5. But having really nothing to do with the other 4 murders. When we were over there in London doing American Ripper, there was a night there. The film crew was working on the next day's shoots. I was up at the bar at the hotel lobby, and they treated me like a king everywhere over there. History was great. We were staying in 7-star hotels. I've never seen one, let alone stay in one. And I'm up at the bar, and these two guys in suits come up and excuse themselves and introduce themselves as agents for Scotland Yard, and let me know that while they didn't agree with me about the killer being H.H. Holmes, they did want me to know that for a long time they'd agreed, and they'd been convinced that there had never been one man in 5 murders, that it had always been a copycat involved.
Wow.
And that Dear Boss letter with ripperology is always called the journalistic hoax, was their key, how different that letter was from the other correspondence involved in those killings. And I'll never forget that. That was quite an evening. And but nobody wanted to go that far.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to go that far. They were still beat up over. You guys remember that Amelia Earhart scandal?
Mm-hmm.
And
where they say they found
it on the dock.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And they'd almost lost their whole network over that. And they were afraid, going as far as I wanted them to go with Ripper, and I couldn't prove it. I couldn't prove it at all. They'd hired we had a couple of linguists over there, English linguists, who said that they'd long been convinced that Dear Boss had been written by an American trying to sound English, an American with medical knowledge. And that Catherine Eddowes murder, when they were removing an organ and a piece of the ear, that was a great part of the show. Yeah. And we'll see. After the show was over, I was called by a fella that said he was FBI. I never attempted to prove it. We were on the phone. So you can take it where you want to go with it. But he said, the mistake I made when I got the Dear Boss correspondence compared to the Holmes correspondence, the handwriting. Right. Anyone taking a look at it with your own eyes, you can see it's this. I can see it's the same. Everyone at the TED Talk saw it was the same up on the screen. But, in forensic science and something you want to prove, use to prove a homicide, you've got to have more than that. It's got to be more than that. And it's, the numbers came back 97% with the organization that we hired from the University of Buffalo to compare. And They said remarkably similar, they said. They didn't say a direct match, which the naysayers and the naysayers and the doubters always fall back on. They said it was similar. They didn't say it was direct match. Okay. Well, this fella that said he was FBI told me the mistake I had made. He said if I had done this right, the world would be talking about Jack the Ripper being solved right now. He said the mistake I had made was when I compared the correspondence, I should have never given that outfit the Dear Boss letter. He said they'd learned this lesson the hard way years ago. You take a cut from that letter. You don't identify it. You don't let them know this is the most famous letter in the history of true crime.
Yeah.
And they said, you should have sent that cut to compare with the Holmes handwriting. He said, they'd have come back direct match.
Yeah.
He said they were reluctant to get involved in that. And he said, the FBI had learned that lesson years ago, that he said. And like I said, I can't prove he was FBI, but it makes sense.
But
it makes sense. Yeah.
It does make sense. I mean, and as you said, you can't prove the case, but you've got great circumstantial to get it to where it needs to go, I've watched many a true crime show and many investigation discovery that, the guys get convicted on way less than what I even, and this was 12, 15 years ago that I first heard you in Chicago. And I'm sure we've evolved well past that, because that was, prior to any of the show or anything that was coming on. So while maybe you can't.
I'm not the first guy that came up with Holmes being Jack the Ripper. There were guys, theorizing that long before I got to it. I just took it to the next step. I took it to those scientists who had the computer program that all the criminology outfits use to compare handwriting.
Mm-hmm.
And when the numbers came back, 97%, it was like, wow, the greatest quote I've ever seen in all the years I've been doing anything about Holmes, there was a Fox reporter, a local Fox News reporter in Chicago. And this was years ago. He wrote a great article, but he said, you know what? You guys can say whatever you want about this. But he said, just think about it. Just stop, take a deep breath, and think about what are the odds that these two extremes, Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes, on opposite sides of the Atlantic at the same time, had the same handwriting. He said, come on, the odds are astronomical. And that quote always stuck with me. It just stuck with me, and
yeah. That is very, very compelling too. And to your point that you brought up about history, they've got such constraints, especially with call it sponsors, call it ratings, call it whatever they have. They've got the constraints that they can't let those
business
down. Yeah, but to the same point, you said that people in London are your biggest following. Well, guess what? They've got a business too, and they probably love you bringing attention to it because Jack the Ripper is their business. They get great revenue off of that. Whether you're controversial or not, you're still bringing in revenue to them. So I can see why they would want to harbor that and bring that in too.
Well, we'll see what happens. But I tell you what, I when I was selling print copies of my book, I sold a lot of copies in the UK.
I could imagine.
There you go.
Dean, you guys can see I'm kind of, everything's kind of exploding around me right now.
Right.
I can't wait to see what Hulu comes up with Scorsese and DiCaprio. I know I admire Eric Larson and love his book, The Devil in the White City. I think I've read it 3 times probably. Some of the quotes he some of the facts he comes up with are just amazing to me about Holmes and what was going on, and the Chicago police's inability to identify any of the many missing women during the fair.
Right.
And here we have the murder castle 2 miles down the road from the first Ferris wheel, and it's going to be quite a show for Hulu to pull off.
Well, speaking of the murder castle, the pair of you have been in there, right? I mean, Dean,
I have not. I've been outside the building.
Okay.
I've been in there twice.
Yeah. That's describe that to me, just walking in there and the feeling you get when you walk into the basement. You especially, Jeff, because you've got the family connection, so there's already some type of energy there. But what did you feel walking in there?
Besides being the south side.
Are you sure you want this?
Yeah, absolutely. I want this.
Right, because I went to doctors, I went to neurologists, I went to had them do MRIs, I had them take medicine, I had them check everything they could after I was in there. And
wow.
My best buddy Kim and I went to 63rd and Wallace when I was writing the book years ago. And Dean, if you've been there, you know what we're talking about at 63rd and Wallace in Englewood. It's a rough place.
Yep. That's to say the least.
The cops get out to buy out of the units out to buy a Coke in a liquor store in full SWAT gear. I mean, they're scared.
Oh yeah, even the police don't stop at the red lights there. That's for sure.
when we couldn't, Kim and I couldn't pay the taxi driver enough money to stay and wait for us while we were inside. He left, and we offered him a lot of money. And so when we got back on the bus, the transit line back to downtown, we were sitting in a regular seat, and this 2 very nice African-American ladies come up. They grabbed me. My friend Kim is African-American, so he was okay. But they grab me and take me up to the handicap seats and say, don't say a word, don't make a noise, stay still between us or you're in big trouble on this bus.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, that's America, wow. So it's a rough place. You kind of, when you're there, Dean, what was your initial reaction to, I know everyone that goes thinks this, they ask themselves this question: why would the United States federal government build a post office on top of what they know happened there? It's still amazing to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the location is difficult to, but no, we were walking around. We walked in the little grassy area with the tree,
Yeah.
and I know it's kind of like the building was not there or something. It was, I mean, you can line up the old picture to the new building and say, okay, this is kind of where it was. But just to see the building in its Mayday at the time would have been spectacular. I mean, you would have been looking up to this monstrosity of a castle, and it's like it says, Murder Castle. So to see this little rinky-dink post office there just did not give it the same pizzazz that I was hoping for. So a little lackluster there, but
when we were there, it took us a while, and it was because of Kim. The superintendent finally allowed us down into the basement. It had been barricaded, the door. The employees didn't go down there. They thought it was haunted. Yeah, there you go.
yeah,
And
there's a comparison.
the murder castle, the post office was not over the top of where the murder castle had been. It was bordered up against the one wall on each side. I think they overlapped a couple of feet maybe.
Right.
But the post office sat off, and like you said, Dean, there's a little park with a couple of trees there next to the post office where the castle had stood. So when we went down with the custodian, and I write about it in the book, I didn't believe in any of the stuff you guys, I know you're both paranormalists, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Professionally.
And you're proud of it. Yeah. And I didn't believe in any of that stuff. I didn't believe in the supernatural. I didn't believe in life after death. And I write about it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came back up an hour later, all those things were first and foremost in my head, because I know what's down there. I consider it the paranormal center of the universe. That basement. I tried to get the Ghost Adventures and Zach. I was on Zach's show once in Indianapolis. I tried to get him to go down in the basement. He wouldn't do it. I tried to get Dave Schrader to go down in the basement. He wouldn't do it. I tried to get the Ghost Hunters to go down there with me. They wouldn't do it. I don't know why. But I tried to convince them, if we go down there and we pull it off right, you guys might be in for something very surprising, because I know what I felt down there, and I know the voices I heard. Now, the people with me didn't hear them. And I guess that's pretty normal in ghost hunting, I guess. Some people hear and some don't. Mm-hmm. But it was a spooky place. And, no one used it. It was abandoned. A United States Post Office, a federal building. When we went down there, we found 2 original brick tunnels that Holmes had built himself as escape passageways that the feds had left alone. Maybe intending to use them themselves one day, I don't know. But we also found the wall that would have been up against the murder castle, the post office basement. When we got down there, there was a cutout in the wall. And you could tell it was professionally done, formally done. It had been cut out. It was wide enough for 2 men to walk through at the same time, and about 6 feet high. And it had been resealed, re-bricked, or re-walled, however you want to call it, after they were done, whatever they were doing. And I've never, even all the FOIA requests I've made, I've never been able to determine what was going on down there whenever that was. But it was, back in the 30s or 40s, something like that.
You got to get Geraldo. Got to get Geraldo on the case.
That's a great hit. He can probably do it, huh? He likes Chicago. Too. He likes Chicago. But I'm convinced that was one of the reasons why that post office was put there. They wanted to get on the other side of that wall to where the castle had been, and they wanted to do it when no one could see them. They didn't just go digging straight down from that little green patch of grass. Mm-hmm. They could have done that easy, Dean. You were there. They could have done right down there. It was a cutout in the wall. And I'd be fascinating to see what was going on there. It might have been nothing. Maybe it's just another Holmes coincidence. But you guys know me now. I don't buy those things.
Listen, there's just too many coincidences then, because we talked about the police officers in Chicago that were, quote unquote, in on it. The dentist, quote unquote, in on it. Now the federal government, quote unquote, in on it. The handwriting analysis. Too many things that just the truth is there, but maybe what it is, people just can't handle. I don't know. That's
and I'm used to getting called a conspiracy theorist now, and all those things, the names I get called. So, and they don't bother me anymore like they used to. And I'm just interested to see how Hulu pulls off their stream. I mean, they've got 8 shows to tell the whole story. So it's going to be interesting to see what Scorsese comes up with.
Am I correct in my assumption here that were you consulted on any of the Hulu shows? I mean, did they get your opinion on anything just to no? So it'd be interesting to see.
I was contacted by MGM. They're thinking about doing something, and then an outfit that works for Hulu on documentaries contacted me. But no, I haven't been touched by anyone on the stream at all. So I'm hoping they do. I would love to be involved. I'd love to meet DiCaprio and Scorsese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Segue for a second. You mentioned that you were on one of Zach's and his crew's show. What were you doing with them in Indiana, if I may ask?
That was one of the houses that Holmes murdered a little boy at.
Okay.
And it's on Ghost Adventures, and if you guys, they show it once in a while. Keep an eye open. It's a 2-hour special. Mm-hmm. And I went up with Zach and the crew up into the attic of this old Indianapolis house, and it was a lot of fun working with them. And then it was a good show. It was a good show. People say they liked it.
I've seen it. I just wanted to bring it up because I loved it. But at the same token, you mentioned prior to going into the basement of the murder castle, you were more of a skeptic. But after you came out, your views had changed. Did that take any play in when you went in with Zach and the guys into Indiana? I mean, this was after you'd been down in the basement, yes? Then you were with Zach, or was it before?
That's a great question. I didn't have any feeling whatsoever at the house in Indianapolis. I didn't have any feeling whatsoever at the house Holmes was he reportedly grew up in Gilmington, New Hampshire. Nothing bothered me there either. Now the church across the road bothered me, and the little building that was said that he taught elementary school in bothered me. But I think maybe that was just a natural, distress.
Well, I'll give you a spiritualist opinion on that, because it's interesting you say that. And in my opinion, like it or not, I believe people's DNA has memories, right? And you have a partial bit of DNA to Holmes yourself, and you obviously, as we know. Yeah. So when you walk into these places, or for your point there, you're across the street from the church, all those people, all those past souls, all that past energy, they recognize Holmes energy. And that's in your memory, your DNA memory, right? So the same thing, all those past souls that were in that basement, that murder castle, when you walked in there, that energy recognized the energy that you had in you. And I think that's what brought that wave of emotions. That's just my opinion, but from a spiritualist, that's the way I see it.
When I came out, I was messed up for quite a while. I went to I went to be had some. I thought I had a disorder. I went to see some doctor specialists. They diagnosed me as epileptic.
Yeah.
That I was suffering from seizures, and that obsession I'd had changing my entire life, running this story down, had probably resulted in a grand mal seizure down in the basement.
Wow.
And, and they, prescribed some medicine, right?
Yeah.
And but I tried, I stayed away from it. The first, my first write on bloodstains, all right? I was trying more to write about the Holmes documentary story. This one now is more about, to tell you guys the truth, you know what? I tend to believe you guys now more. I tend to believe in the people that say they see things, they hear things, they feel things now, because I know what happened to me in that basement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And whether it was because I'm an epileptic that was having a seizure or not, I know what I felt, and I tried to capture it in this revision. So when it comes out, I want you guys to take a look and tell me what you think. But it's and you know what? When our new website is done here, and the book is out, we're gonna, for a limited time, we're gonna give it free for 3 or 4 days to my friends, fans, and followers who bought the book earlier before. Obviously, there'll be other people that didn't buy the book that'll get it. But I just want that paranormal thing, which I used to blow off, to tell you the truth. Now I think I understand a little bit more about why 65 million Americans believe in ghosts, and there's something down there. There's something down there. I just hope one day I can get Dave Schrader to go down there with me now.
I'll go down there with you.
Okay. All right.
All right, next time you're in Chicago, let's make it a trip. I'll get us into the post office. You get us down in the basement.
My
picture's already on the post office wall.
It's not easy getting permission.
Yep.
Right.
It's I went down there. Did you guys ever see the History Show? Another great show History did. Did you ever see Haunted History? The one I went down in the basement with Adam Seltzer?
Yes.
Yeah. That was a good show. That was a good show. But
absolutely.
You know what? That second time, with all those people with me, with the film crew, with Adam and all the doubters and the naysayers, I didn't feel anything that second time.
Well,
yeah. Interesting. So it's not a coincidence then, in my opinion. I mean, there's too many coincidences. Then go ahead, Dean. You were going to say
I
something.
think it's kind of interesting that from a paranormal aspect, I dive into the history, where Jeff is taking the history aspect and diving more into the paranormal.
Yes, so interesting dynamic there. Yeah.
Some of the things looking into your history, Jeff, is I found that there was how this whole thing came about is like your grandfather, like you said earlier, your grandfather had this paperwork. I guess they moved to California to get away from the fact that they're related to the devil, basically. And there was an episode not an episode, but there was a situation in your family where someone was possibly related to General Robert E. Lee. Is that I read that somewhere?
My grandmother, that was her thing. She thought we were related to General Robert E. Lee. And for years, we sat there and listened to her go on and on and on about this, spending a lot of money. And I'll never forget my grandfather just sitting over there at the head of the table, not saying a word.
Not saying a word, yeah. And you were there from the beginning, and that's interesting. So you're not related to General E. Lee, huh?
No.
Because that's a whole other show right there. I mean,
that's a whole other show. I don't even know if that's good. I don't know.
But one of the things that I was doing before the show or prepping for the show, I was looking at a lot of Herman's life. So Herman is natural blood. He's not adopted. So that the DNA would be matching, right? So that's what we know. Yeah. So he had, of course, wife number 1, which is Clara, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Clara.
And then they had the son, Roberts was the son. And then wife 2 was Murda. And I'm going to get to a point. And then she had a daughter, Lucy, right? And then there was a wife 3, Wilhelmina, Minnie, I guess.
You're getting ahead of me too. I wouldn't be able to write down how many wives did he actually have, Dean?
It looks like 4. So it was like Claire was the first one with the son. So that was probably your family lineage, right? That's what I'm thinking your bloodline came from. Because then there was a wife too who had a daughter, Lucy, and that's the one that I believe sent a letter to Holmes while he was in jail. And Wilhelmina, Minnie, and then wife 4 was
there was, yeah.
And then there was wife 4, like a Georgina Yoke.
Georgina.
Yeah. So those are the wives that I found. But one of the things that I found interesting, and I wanted to ask you, Jeff, if you don't mind, what year were you born?
1957.
1957.
Holmes would have been 96.
So I'm going to make a point to you that I found in my research. In 1956, Clara died March 9th of 1956 at the age of 95.
California.
Her son Robert died November 3rd of 1956 at the age of 76. And Lucy, the daughter of Murda, died December 29th of 1956 at 67. So everybody of that part died the year before you were born. And I thought that, to me, as far as researching historically and seeing paranormally, I'm like, well, that's a strange little coincidence, isn't it?
And you know what? I'm glad you told me that. I don't, it's not often I go on shows like this and you guys bring me up something I wasn't aware of. That's strange. And it's, I'll go on other shows and they'll say, oh, Jeff, that's just another Holmes coincidence. And I'll say, okay.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. But that one, it makes me get the chills because it's just like, they were all different ages. One was 67, one was 76, one was 95.
Yeah, that's weird. I'm gonna ask my dad. When we get off here tonight, I'm gonna ask my dad. I'll let you guys know what he says.
Yeah. Well, God bless your dad, man. How old is your father?
He's 90, and he's one of those guys that'll go past 100. He looks great.
God bless him, man.
Yeah. And Clara was an interesting woman. There should probably be more research done on her.
Well, she was 95.
What?
She was 95 years old when she died.
Well, and my father gave me her diary.
Oh, wow.
When Holmes was at Moyamensing prison awaiting execution, Clara visited him 3 times and then made immediate trips back to Chicago, where she didn't live, and then back to the prison. Well, I'll guarantee you what was going on. Holmes was getting cash.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing banking for him. And, he needed the money to be buying 2 graves, to be buying concrete, blocks, to be paying
somebody to put in it.
And to buy that substituted corpse and all those things that he was good at. And one of the other things that I get commented on about, just another coincidence, a month or 2 after the supposed execution, the boss of the prison, the superintendent there, who'd had to have agreed to all these strange things regarding Holmes. I mean, Holmes was in his prison cell in his suit, in his clothes. They brought a desk in so he could write, and he was having his own clothes food brought in, all these weird things. And a month or 2 after the alleged execution, the man blew his brains out in his office there at the prison.
Wow.
Yeah.
Coincidence? I don't know.
That's funny. After a while, you see where if you were in my shoes, after a while, the coincidences get hard to stomach anymore.
Don't even talk to me about coincidences. That's a whole other.
Dean is the master of synchronicity, man. And everything happens synchronicity for this guy.
Yeah.
But going back to what we started with too, with just all of the, everybody referred to him as the devil, and believe what you will about the devil. Like we mentioned, it's just negative energy or bad energy, whatever you want to call it. But to think that all that energy, again, follows everything around. All that negative energy could just easily try to encase. I don't know, I'm going to harken back to the old saying, the greatest trick the devil ever did was convince the world he didn't exist. And if there's a way to do that, it's by wiping out things that, they wouldn't want you to know. The feds taking over the building, the cops, all of it just going in the pewter cross with H.H. Holmes versus, the name Mudgett on it. All of that stuff just kind of goes back to, it's the world's greatest cover-up.
Well, you guys think of that. Why would the man, or even if it wasn't the man, why would anyone put that pewter cross on top of that fake grave with H.H. Holmes on it? Was that a joke? Was that something out of Saturday Night Live, or was that some type of
calling card? To me, that's a calling card. That's like, it's kind of like a magician does misdirection. They'll leave it there for you and say, hey, this is exactly what you're looking to find. This is me. This is where I'm at. When all the while you're looking at the left hand, not knowing what the right hand's doing.
Well, and like we were talking about earlier, this thing about all these documentaries coming out about how the concrete was there because Holmes was afraid of the dark. All of a sudden, he didn't want grave robbers touching his sacred body. He did all these silly things. When I think it's pretty obvious, the man didn't want midnight grave robbers there at Holy Cross Cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way they could have. Hell, it took a team. We had to have a team of 20 engineers there to get that thing open.
Well, and you bring up a very good point. That's the OJ of our time, right? Or of his time, rather, right? To make the comparison. Now, if he's freshly, quote unquote, buried, of course he's going to put something in concrete because it's going to take that body time to decompose. The last thing he needs is somebody digging him up 12 days after he's been buried and realizing, hey, this ain't the damn guy we're looking for, So
that's what crosses my mind. That's what hits me, and they all tell me I'm just trying to sell books. So.
Well, I didn't write a book, and that's the first thing I came up with, so it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So
in my revision, everybody's going to have a chance to download it for free. So there's no intent to make money there on that. So give it a shot. See what you guys think.
Okay.
So bending my brain a little bit, I was thinking about Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes, and actually more H.H. Holmes here. And it seemed like he always had somebody to help him. He kind of like didn't really do it on his own. There was always somebody that he had in his pocket. And I was thinking, well, maybe that's the same for Jack the Ripper. Maybe he is tied to the Jack the Ripper, but he had someone, like he had a brute dude doing it, and then he was the medical side of it, and it just looks like one of the same people. Is that a potential? Is that something is that an angle that you've looked into? Is say that maybe they were working together with somebody?
He had a remarkable ability to have people come help him do evil things.
That's what I'm saying.
Maybe to an extent that we've never seen before. I don't, it's all, that's one of the hardest things to get people to, believe or agree with me on. How could a man have had innocent people do such terrible things for him?
Once he accepts the fact that he's a devil, everything's open, in his brain, everything's open.
And that's,
he has no conscience.
I try not to go that far. I try not to go that far in my writings because it'll be interesting to see where Hulu goes with that.
Yeah.
But I'd be curious to see if you ever theorized or got into more of that, maybe he was Jack the Ripper, but he also had an accomplice with him.
Well, then I think Jeff hit it before too.
He did. Yeah. He had an accomplice everywhere he went.
That's what I was saying. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, everywhere.
Yeah.
And, when they arrested him in Boston, guys, he was there with his latest woman. They were getting ready to get on a ship and go back to London.
Wow.
That's when he was arrested in Boston.
And the one mistake he made was didn't pay the little criminal guy in Missouri.
Yeah,
one mistake.
He talked too much. Yeah.
Loose lips sink ships. That's true. Yep.
No, that's
my money.
There, or he might have never been caught.
$500.
The other great thing about which I'm having fun explaining about I tried to do more work on the trial itself, and
I saw that.
I don't think anybody, history didn't want to get into that much. I don't think anyone really has, and it's they have these theories about why the district attorney only indicted him on one murder and why they only tried him on the one. And, and I tried to explain in this chapter this time, listen, he'd been indicted 3 or 4 times already. There were 7 or 8 other jurisdictions just waiting their turn if that jury came back with not guilty. All they needed was 1 guilty and 1 sentenced to death by hanging. I mean, Judge Arnold was a good judge. He was successful before, successful after, and D.A. Graham was excellent. If you ever read his closing argument to the jury, it's excellent. It's excellent. And, here we have a word for word trial transcript of the entire trial. Wow. Which Hulu'd have the ability, Scorsese'd have the ability to run with on one of those episodes. I hope they do.
So there is an article here that I found, and my system is lovely. That's why I was late coming into the show. My beautiful computer just doesn't like to work with me. But there's an article here that says, woman opens family Bible to find handwritten note from America's first serial killer who murdered guests in this hotel for his begging for prayers of the day he was hung. Do you know anything about this letter in the Bible?
No.
Where'd you find it, Dean?
Dailymail.com UK. Claire Fennell. Let's see if I can share my page here.
When you get into the legend and lore of Holmes, you had every major newspaper, in America, maybe the world, writing about the trial, writing about, the murder castle, writing about Holmes in Chicago. You guys know what happens when you get every major newspaper covering one subject with reporters that aren't even there.
Absolutely.
With hearsay and circumstantial evidence, everything gets stretched out. That's why a criminal trial, a court of law will not accept that. They won't accept a newspaper article. You have to get that reporter there, and he has to testify that he has direct knowledge of the subject. They're not going to accept hearsay on that. And you had a lot of that. And I agree with many of the people that want to say a lot of the Holmes story was stretched. A lot of it was fudged. A lot of it may not have been true. They're probably correct. But that doesn't mean we weren't dealing with a terrible, terrible guy. Let's see here. Woman opens family Bible to find handwritten note from Mary. I don't know.
Hard to say. And to your point on that too, Jeff, I mean, notoriety goes a long way. It's not, I wouldn't put it past people to just, oh my God, I found this, and, it's totally fabricated too. I can't speak to the source of Daily Mail as to, how credible they are either, but.
I don't know. It might be very accurate. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess it does reference you in there a little bit, Jeff, as Dean was saying. It says the family is trying to do some DNA testing to verify everything.
We did DNA. My dad and I gave DNA samples. There's no doubt about that. And they were run back to King's College in the UK, which is the one Scotland Yard and the FBI use a lot of. And they said that they'd have results back in 3 days. And it was months later that I all of a sudden saw those 2 anthropologists giving an interview with Rolling Stone. If you guys Google it up, Rolling Stone, H.H. Holmes, University of Pennsylvania, pull it up. You'll get to see where they said that they'd given up on DNA.
It wouldn't surprise me, based on everything again that we've talked about here with the post office, the cops, everything, the dental records. Wouldn't surprise me if somebody just fudged a DNA record to give to you. I mean, I wasn't there with the test. You weren't there with the test. They could have just fudged a DNA record to say, yeah, we took your DNA, Jeff. We got your dad's DNA, and here it is. It matches to what we found in the grave. you know, they don't want anything to do with it. They could have just given you some bogus result.
Well,
Unless it came back conclusive. Let's put it that way.
well,
I mean, it's somebody was
and
covering
all
that
of
part.
it, I just find it fascinating that the results came back, guys,
Mhm.
after those anthropologists gave that interview with Rolling Stone,
Right.
just in time for history to come up with that conclusion.
Right.
So, you know, I don't know. I'm not accusing anyone of anything dishonest or
No,
illegal.
I wasn't there.
I'm just telling you, I know what those anthropologists told me to my face, that the DNA, they'd given up on it. They
Mhm.
told me that to my face.
Mhm.
And, you know, they were comparing it with my father's and mine that was perfect. And they said it had degraded. That's the exact word they used. I didn't even know DNA did stuff like that, especially when you're holding. You know, when I picked the skull up, guys, you'll love this. Go run this with your listeners. We were in the University of Pennsylvania there at the laboratories. They were all sitting around tables getting ready to do some more shooting, and I snuck around the corner. I got into the what do you call the room there where they have the gurneys and the bodies laying on the tables? What do you call it?
That's the morgue.
Kind of the morgue, but it's where they did all their experiments. And UPenn's famous for that. And so I snuck in. The skeleton's laid out. It's way too short. I could see it with my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And I reached over and I grabbed the skull in my hand. And, you know, he and I are talking. And then they come in, they start yelling and screaming at me that I'm destroying the DNA and all that. And King Scholar said I hadn't done anything to DNA. But they took it from me. And I said, you know, there is something you both might want to check. What? I said, there's a brain in the skull. They said, no, there's not. It's 121 years old. There wouldn't be possible. There can't be a brain in that skull. I said, well, check. So they both ran over there, grabbed it, and they rolled it over, and the brain's still in the skull.
Oh, wow.
No one's answered me my questions on that yet.
Right. How's this possible?
Wow.
And I guess it's possible. I guess I don't know. Is it? I don't know.
I hunt ghosts. I don't.
Everything else was gone. Everything. All the
not a
other
zombie.
flesh was gone. All the other flesh was gone.
You would think that they would have any type of viable DNA in that as well, too. But I don't know.
It sounds something like Dean Winchester would do, though. I'm thinking, go in and sneak around and hold the skull and talk to him and stuff. If you're familiar with the show Supernatural, that's what I'm referring to.
I wanted to talk to him. I wanted to say, you evil son of a bitch. Calling him
Right?
a son of a bitch gets testy. It gets it's a challenge when you're calling your own great grandfather a son of a bitch. It gets to be a problem.
Right.
Well, look at here, Gramps. You know.
Yeah.
But when I was watching the show, The American Ripper, and you got to the episode where you found like this, where you could actually potentially hear his voice on that piano, something with the piano or something like that. Remember that episode?
Oh, yeah, I
It
remember.
was like it recorded
remember.
something.
Yeah.
And I remember muting it because I don't know why, I just didn't want to hear his voice. I didn't want to hear, if he says he's evil, I have no interest in hearing him. So I actually muted that part on the TV show. But I don't know.
I don't think anyone will argue that this was an evil man. I don't think anyone's going to argue. They're going to argue how many he killed. And but then you get into there was a great article the other day. One of the Chicago newspapers wrote up about how we're coming around the corner on all the legend and the lore. He didn't kill 200 people. He confessed to killing 27, but they found out some of those were alive later. Although I don't know why that is any kind of evidence how many he murdered or not. But then they said, but you start getting into the fact where here's this guy that murdered entire families to obtain a life insurance policy, almost entire families, and then in order to pull it off, wrote 2 letters from the sweet little girls he murdered. The one he cut the feet off because she had club feet and he didn't want anyone to identify her. He writes these 2 letters and takes it to their mother, and it's at the bottom of each, "I love you, Mom," and all that kind of stuff. And here's this guy writing that letter after murdering those 2 little girls and stuffing their bodies in a crate. I mean, the Chicago article said, okay, we may never know how many he murdered, and maybe he murdered 9, maybe he murdered 13, maybe he murdered whatever. But just think about this crime or series of crimes. We're talking about something we don't want to ever see again in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think the guy wrote it perfect. I think he had it right on the head on the nail. Yeah.
Well, we see repeats of stuff like that in the news, but when you mentioned Clara, you have her Bible or diary?
Diary.
Do you have anything of Herman's? Do you have anything of his, like a coat or the hat or any thing that he left behind?
No,
So
I would imagine the UPenn does. Now, they said they didn't keep anything, but there was a hat in the coffin.
Because when they tore down the murder castle, that's when everyone kind of ran in and took stuff. What people were
that's one of those. See, that's what people want to write about now, Dean. And you know what? No one was there that wrote about it. They don't even know that the news article they picked to write about it had a reporter that was there. I mean, it's, when you deal with 1890s history,
right?
I don't know what to tell you. All I know is I have a really tough time getting around that corner where the chief of police, who was in charge of the inspection of the murder castle, had been Holmes's private lawyer for at least 12 actions. I mean, I have a hard time getting around that, believing anything the Chicago police said about the murder castle.
And one of the documentaries that I was watching is like the policemen, the Pinkertons, were following his trail on the railroad, looking for all these clues and putting the case together. Have you yourself done that? Have you gone to all the different locations that Holmes has said that he lives? Because that could be book number 2. You could go from blood stains to blood trails here.
Wow. Nice plug.
I'll give you guys a secret, though. This when my revision is finished here this week and polished next week, and it goes out, that's my last moment with Holmes. It was a passion that turned into an obsession, and I need to get on with my life.
Closing the chapter. Sure, that's fantastic.
It's been enough.
Yeah,
and it's not something. There are people out there that are going to be friends and fans and followers about it, and there's going to be people out there that don't believe anything
you're not going to please
about the man. And you know what? I can't change any minds. I can't rewrite history. I can go on great shows like yours, and we can discuss, the subject, and maybe gather some interest from your listeners. But that's I've now I'm going to sit back and watch how the Hollywood handles it.
Yeah, let it play out.
And it's I'm dying to see it. It's 2024 when the show is going to come out.
Oh wow!
They start producing in January.
Excellent. And
now I was on a Zoom call the other day, and one of the big, I won't tell you the name because I'm sure they'll get in trouble if I say this, but one of the big Hollywood groups, they were doing a Zoom call on me, probably to see if I'm too old looking to work on any more of their stuff. Hollywood's a tough business, trust me.
Yeah, right. No respect.
He said, I brought up the fact that, Keanu Reeves is going to play the architect, Burnham, but they haven't picked who's playing Holmes. And the one guy said, "Oh, yeah, they have." And I said, "Really? Who?" And he goes, "You've known the whole time. He just doesn't want to announce it."
Oh.
It's DiCaprio.
So you did
That's
know.
what this guy said, and I don't have any proof. I don't have anything. I don't have DiCaprio agreeing to that or anything, but that's what this guy said from one of the biggest outfits.
Yeah. It's a, hey, look, you said it. You heard it directly from them on the meeting that was in there. So
you guys have it first tonight on your show.
Breaking news. Hey, well, I appreciate that too. And I want to mention a couple things because we're coming right up on close time. We got about the last 5 here to run everything through.
Yeah, I got to call it quits here pretty quick too.
Yep, not a problem. So that's what we'll do. I mean, I'm going to give a closing thought, and then Dean, unless anybody wants to go first, I'll go. Go ahead, Dean.
Oh, no, just sorry for being late coming on here, Jeff. It's been a while. Haven't seen you in a while, so it's great to see you again. Thanks for coming up on our show for us, and always good luck with everything going forward. And God bless you, Dad.
When I come and do one of those presentations in your area, make sure you come and see it. Okay, it'll be an elongated TED Talk about why I think Jack the Ripper is solved. It's done.
God bless your dad and your family, and good luck with everything going forward.
All right.
All right. Well, on my end, just tying everything back to the Hierophant, which is the card that we were coming at. What this is telling us to do is earn some Hermit. The Hermit, telling us to earn some respect. It wants us to make sure that we are a master seeking for the truth. So stay focused on your goals, stay determined. And, Jeff, that's exactly why I wanted to bring you on. What you're working on, you're determined. You're going to close that goal out. You're going to become the master in that realm. And, again, appreciate you coming out here, adjusting with us, being fluid in the time. And, it's been a pleasure.
Tell you what, thank you both. It's been one of the, I've done a lot of these podcasts, and I think this is one of my favorites ever. And I really appreciate your guys. You guys understand the subject. H.H. Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
You've watched American Ripper, and the ups and downs of it. And it's been a great time, and thank you very much. I hope your listeners enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and if they can you plug your book and the where they can find everything for when we release this on YouTube?
Well, just keep an eye out on the Bloodstains Facebook page. We'll be putting the link to the website there in about 2 weeks, and they can go right there. And like I said, for a limited time, we're going to be offering the ebook for free. And it's 365 pages. I mean, it's a good download. It's just people have to start reading ebooks, because I'm not going to print this one. This is going to be an ebook.
All right, fantastic. Everybody, again, thanks for joining us. We're going to let everybody roll. Have a great evening.
Good night, everybody.
Oh, hey. Wow. Oh, hey, everyone. It's Dean from Paranormal Pickers. Oh, I got the preview for the next episode. Oh, yeah. Here, take a peek. Oh.